Terve ja tervetuloa Ustavani. Welcome back to Finnish Firearms and History. And today, we're diving into a little-known prototype from Finland's early days of rifle manufacturing, the Mauser-Style safety on the Finnish M27 Mosin-Nagant. Now, this small component is part of a much bigger story and represents a fascinating what-if in the history of Finnish small arms development. If you've ever dealt with a standard Mosin-Nagant safety, you know that it's cumbersome at best and downright impossible to manipulate at worst. And the Finns certainly thought so, and they tried to fix it. So to understand the M27 and the Mauser-Style safety that the Finns made for it, you've got to know the backstory first. And this rifle was the first major redesign of the Mosin-Nagant produced in Finland. We're not really counting the M91-24 because it was a much further departure from the original Russian M91 rifle than the Civil Guard M91-24 was. And after its official adoption, immediate and comprehensive changes were made to the M91 design to create the M27. These included a new barrel, a new stock, a trigger mechanism, sights, handguard, barrel bands. And this extensive overhaul was driven by both ambition and envy. In February 1927, the Finnish Ministry of Defense proposed a new infantry rifle. After the lessons of the Great War, they wanted a modern universal short rifle, chambered in 7.62 by 54R. They'd later go to the 53R round, and loosely based upon the superb Mauser Carabiner 98A. That's what the Finnish cavalry used in the early 1920s before they had to give them up for M91 RVs, and that was the ideal. That's what a lot of the Finnish Jager officers wanted based upon their experiences in the German army, and they looked around the rest of the world, and everybody else was going to intermediate length rifles. You look at Germany, they were going to go to the Mauser standard model, and eventually the K98. Britain and America had already went to intermediate length models. You had the Springfield 1903, you had the Lee Enfield No. 1 Mark III, and even around the rest of the world, the Japanese were moving to the Type 99, the Italians would eventually go to the Type 38. So the original Mosin-Nagant M91 rifle, it's 51.5 inches long. It's particularly cumbersome to carry around. The idea was they would go to the M27. They'd have a much handier weapon to use. And what the Finns found was quite different reality. Being cash-strapped, the Finnish government refused to completely fund a new Mauser-style rifle, so the Finnish Ordnance Department was forced into a makeshift solution. Essentially, they were going to modernize the obsolescent Mosin-Nagant M91 rifle design instead. And this compromise, however, proved somewhat prudent because within a couple of years, the defecation hit the ventilation and the Great Depression eviscerated Finland's already meager defense budget. The production of the M27 finally got underway in late 1927. First barrels were made in December of that year, and the Finnish Army initially ordered barrels only from Tikkakoski, and later on in 1932, they also undertook limited production at the State Rifle Factory, Valtion Kaveri-tehdas, otherwise known as VKT. And this is where a lot of the final assembly and the manufacture of new parts occurred at the Asevarikko Uksi, or Asevarikko 1, AV1, Weapons Depot 1 in Helsinki. And you can see some of the other influences that occurred at this time. Initially, the M27 was going to have a carabiner-style slingshot in the stock, much like the M27 RV and the M91 RV, and it was going to have this cool Mauser-style safety on the bolt, the subject of this whole video. And the Mauser-style safety was going to replace the standard Russian cocking knob safety. The Russian cocking knob safety, as you'll see in the video later in this, it's not as easy to manipulate. You have to pull it back. You have to rotate it. If your hands are greasy, if the rifle's oily, if there's blood, sweat, rain, anything else, it's not going to be particularly efficient for anybody to use in the field. So there was a lot of impetus behind it, and that's what got the Finns on, well, if we can't have the Mauser in the store, then we got to have the Mauser at home, so to speak. And this was the Mauser at home. Now, here's the star of the show. So the continued desire to emulate the Mauser design and Mauser rifles, desired by some individuals in the Finnish Army, permeated itself into this series of trial Mauser-style bolts that were present on some early production examples of the M27. And when I say Mauser-style, I essentially mean the Finns took a standard Mosin-Nagant bolt, and modified the cocking knob on it to work much more like the wing safety on a Mauser bolt. And this manifested itself in modifications to both the cocking knob and the bolt body, which give the new bolt a Mauser-style flip safety look that's incorporated in the rear of the cocking knob. Now, in the video that's about to follow, I'm going to demonstrate loading and unloading this thing, and be forewarned, I'm using Finnish-made VPT dummy rounds and a standard stripper clip. We all know how finicky these standard Mosin-Nagant stripper clips can be, and eventually they work. Sometimes. So yes, as I fumble around with it, just go ahead and laugh at me. It's fine. Won't bother me. Alright, so these are dummy rounds. I'm going to be putting some dummy rounds, Finnish training rounds, VPT made. If they want to load, because we all know how much fun and finicky Mosin-Nagant chargers are. There we go. That's done. Alrighty. Alright, now the neat thing about the M27 with the prototype Mauser safety is that, voila, the weapon is unsafe. Unlike the normal cumbersome Mosin-Nagant process, all we've got to do is flip our Mauser-style safety off. Oh, now we can fire. Click. There goes our round. Chamber another one. We want to put it back on safe. Voila. It's safe once again. So very interesting that the Finns did this. They made it work. They didn't bother to implement it on a large scale. You find them occasionally on M27s. Not a lot. It seems like whatever quantity of them they had, they put into service, and then they just kind of forgot about it. So it's an interesting what if when it comes to Mosin-Nagant parts and modifications by the Finns, because I've messed around with it. Works just fine. A little bit more cumbersome than a Mauser safety, but does the trick. So for comparison's sake, we have all three types of rifles we spoke about today. We have our standard Mosin-Nagant, this one being an M91RV, with the standard cocking knob safety, which we'll show the manipulation of right here. Simply pull the safety back, cock it, and then slide it over. Yes. Not like that requires a ton of strength or anything, or it would be very difficult to grasp this cocking knob and manipulate it while your hands are greasy, sweaty, bloody, take your pick. It's perfectly functional. Everyone knows how easy it is to use. In comparison, we have our Mauser safety and our Finnish prototype M27 Mauser-style safety here. And what you might notice is that they're opposites. So while the Mauser right here is in a position where I can operate the bolt, I can pull the trigger, it's flipped to the left, the Mosin-Nagant style Mauser safety is the opposite. So if I have it to the right, it's going to be on fire, click. But if I have it to the left, like the Mauser is right here, flip it over, can't fire, can't manipulate the bolt. The Mauser is opposite, so if I flip it to the right, we're unsafe. If I flip it to the left, yep, I'm going to be able to fire right there. Now, one other interesting anecdote about these is that the Mausers have an intermediate position, which allows you to load, unload the rifle, take rounds out while the weapon is still safe. The Mauser-style safety on the Mosin-Nagant, that position doesn't exist. You can manipulate it all day long, but it's going to revert to one or the other. Either you're going to be on fire or you're going to be on safe. There's no intermediate position there. Now, when you take a look at this compared to the standard Mosin-Nagant safety, you can see that the cocking knob was modified, and they cut it back a little bit right there. What's harder to see is that the bolt body is also modified. So I bring these up right here. You can see that a little bit of the bolt body has been cut away as well for this. So in comparison, if you had to pick one or the other, I'm definitely not picking this old monstrosity. As much as I like the Mosin-Nagant design, gun is not safe. Why we make a gun have safety? Because this is probably not ever going to be used tactically on the battlefield. Not that the Mauser-style safety is that much better, but compared to trying to manipulate this, yeah, I'm not even going to bother.
Overall, though, the Mauser-Style safety is a much easier to use, much easier to manipulate safety than the standard Mosin-Nagant. However, like I mentioned previously, the time it took to manufacture these, the cost, everything else, it was just never in the cards that the Finnish Army was going to be able to equip its whole force with these on their M27s, let alone retrofit every single Mosin-Nagant they had in service, of which there were over 400,000 with them.
So why didn't the Finns adopt this little device for full-scale production? The answer, as it often was for the fledgling Finnish Army throughout the 1920s and 1930s, simply a matter of cost concerns. Unfortunately, it was far more expensive to modify the bolts than they initially thought, and it was much cheaper to keep the existing, albeit somewhat awkward, standard Mosin-Nagant cocking knob safeties. Because of this, you'll occasionally find these on random, and when I say random, I seriously mean random M27 rifles. I've seen two here in the States, this example, which is a 1932 VKT, and the other one was on a 1940 Tikakaski. The Finns had an existential and desperate fight against an invader, and they seem to have used whatever parts they had on to repair stuff at times, and then just moved on. So overall, it's a really neat piece, another superb example of Finnish ingenuity, and as they would do later with the AK design, the Finns took a solid rifle, kept improving it, and they were willing to try new concepts, even if the ledger book ultimately said big nope in this case. So the Mosin Mauser safety might be a little more cumbersome than a true Mauser safety, but generally gets the job done, and it's way better than a Mosin-Nagant safety. So what do you think? Should the Finns have incorporated this device on their production from the M27 onwards? Would you like to see this on other Mosin-Nagant rifles? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And with that, I will bid you adieu, and I will see all of you in another video.